Hey Peyton, nice to see you again on this beautiful day. This time with a quote from Stephan Bodian. And it goes like this: The narrative we've constructed about life, what the world is like, how we must behave, where we fit into this scheme of things, forms a bubble that cuts us off from life as it really is. Please share your ideas on that quote with us today.
Good afternoon. What a wonderful thought. This is something that's super prevalent in our experience, and it's something that's kind of under the surface. And because he's pointing at something that exists really first person, not really third person, I think a this is an aspect of our experience that can be easy for us to ignore because nobody can look at your experience and point to what is going on there in terms of, are you living in the map or are you living in the territory? Are you directly interfacing with your senses and with your reality, with the people and the energy that surrounds you that you interact with? Or are you actually, within your mind, just slapping labels on all of the things that appear before you and interacting with a two-dimensional label, a word and a concept that you blanket over the things that you actually have the opportunity to convene with directly and to experience directly in your everyday life? Whether it's objects, whether it's sensations, whether it's people, we can see either chair when we look at a chair and we have that word, that label, that concept. Or we can actually experience the tactile sensation on our hand. We can see the way that the light reflects off of the chair. We can see the shape of the chair as it is experienced from the point of view in which we have. And a lot of things are like this, where either we can convene directly, we can actually experience stuff, or much more commonly, we are going to make a map and construct a map and actually be interacting with our map moment to moment, day by day. And of course, both of these modes are going to be present to various extents, blah, blah, blah. But what's easy to not realize, what can be kind of invisible to us, is that because we're interacting with other people, because we're talking with other people, because we write back and forth, a lot of the times we are using language when we describe things. We are using language when we interact with things. We are using language when we are talking to ourselves in our own head as we're navigating our home or navigating our external environment or working or whatever. A lot of things are just a word to us in the way that we actually experience them a lot of the time. And this is okay. It saves a lot of processing power. It can be very efficient for a lot of things, but language, concepts, thoughts are a very thin gruel. They are not actually a rich experience for us to have of whatever is going on. And what he's pointing to, the sense of separation and disconnectedness, is actually a symptom of getting too far out of balance for too long without realizing what's going on here, without regaining our sense of lucidity, or without snapping out of it from time to time and actually waking up out of our thoughts and saying like, oh, wow, and actually taking in the sights, sounds, and sensations of our direct environment, the territory itself, the real sensation experience, the now, the present, that is not just this blanket of concepts and labels that we tend to superimpose over our world. Just living in a world of concepts, just having label me, identity me, self-image me, person you, name you, object here, label, label, label. It can cut us off from directly experiencing these things because all we see is the label. All we see is chair. We don't actually see the shapes and colors, and we don't actually feel these things if we are only interacting with them as their word, as their label within our head. This applies to other people. Are we actually directly sensing this person in front of us? Are we feeling their energy? Are we sensing their body language? Are we intuiting this experience and this shared conversation together? Or am I just labeling? Am I judging? Am I saying sentences to myself? And am I only interacting with the words rather than interacting with the actual experience of whatever is before me? This is subtle because honestly, this is something that only shows up for yourself. This is something that is not on a billboard. This is not a t-shirt that you wear where someone says, hey, you're wearing a red shirt. This is not a a style of your hair that's going to be observed by other people or that you're going to notice in the mirror. This is a subtler aspect of our experience that is inherently first person. How are we interacting with the world? What is our reality to us directly right now? And if we pay attention, we notice that a lot of times we're not living in our senses. We're not living in the territory. We are living in our own map. And this is conditioned by our society more and more over time. And we can notice, for example, that how we experience the world is completely different than how animals experience the world. This guy right here is not living in language. This guy right here is interacting directly with his senses. Every moment he is taking in all that is going on, and he is living in spontaneity, partly because not everything is pre-rehearsed, pre-languaged, pre-planned. And so he's right there with whatever is in front of them. And this is a way of being that is not completely gone for us. Like, we can actually tap into this directly. We can experience it now. We can convene with our senses. We can embody our actual organism and be fully here. And it's something that we're obviously going to snap out of when we need to get into thought, when we need to manipulate concepts, when we need to do projections and calculations about cause and effect. That's all going to be an inevitable part of our experience as we look to navigate the world and do whatever we want to do over time. But if we live only in our thoughts and language, if we live only in the daydream that exists between our ears and never actually in our senses, if we don't directly take in this rich, nourishing present moment, present experience, and now that is direct and not intermediated by concepts, not intermediated by language, then we do experience a fundamental separation, this sort of gnawing insufficiency of our experience, this sort of isolation that occurs within our thoughts when we are just talking to ourselves all the time. And this is a risk that is really high, and nobody is probably going to notice except you. If you don't snap yourself out of that and snap yourself into a direct recognition of your own reality, nobody will do it for you. And so this is a very useful thing to be reminded of for many of us, especially because we are going to be conditioned to think of things in terms of their labels and not actually experience our own senses. What do you think about this, and how do you kind of integrate this reminder into your day-to-day?
Well, great thoughts, Peyton. Thanks for sharing, and also appreciated you showing Puma.
He's a superstar.
He's such a great guy. You mentioned the division between the map and the territory, and when we daydream and are immersed in our thoughts and the concepts and the words and the stories and narratives we tell ourselves, we are merely living in the map and trying to navigate from point A to B very efficiently. So it helps in navigating the real world as a moist robot, having a kind of repetitive automatisms that get us from here to our work where it's the most efficient way. So it's really useful to identify sometimes, to navigate and to effect change in a way, but also for the reality to be taken in, you have to really look at the world as it is, and the surroundings will change. So in winter times there will be snow, so you have to adapt to that as well. So it pays off to really go the middle way, and instead of only living in your daydreams and only identifying you as one thing or the other, or identifying yourself with the labels you once put in place to never be changed, it pays to let go sometimes of these concepts and ideas and just give room again to expand, to breathe. It's like breathing. You don't hold on to your breath forever. To really be alive and feel what makes you come alive, you have to take in the air. You have to take in everything, the now as it is, the experiences you have, all your senses be engaged, to really experience the richness of life as it presents to you. And then you can derive some automatisms and habits from that again that really serve you in the new environment. And like Darwin stated, okay, it's not the richest who survives, it's not the strongest who survives, it's the most adaptable kind of specimen or character that survives. So you have to be really fit and always reflect upon reality as it presents to yourself, and as you can measure it through your senses as well. And then you can really take another step and propose some changes in the process, and propose some theories about how the world really works, and take in the reflections into changing your sense and your theories about how the world really works, so that you will be less wrong. As Stephan Bodian said, the narrative we constructed about life cuts us off from life as it really is. So it's kind of the narrative, it's the stories we tell ourselves about life, about the world, about ourselves, that have this impact of shaping our life and also shaping our perception. Because if we go through life without being aware of all the beauty and all the richness and all the living things and animals and all the relationships we can engage in, life becomes dull, or at least never will be as rich as it can be when you open up your senses, when you open up your worldview, when you really let your beliefs be challenged in a way and state them in a way that can be so that they can be falsified, so that you can really improve yourself. But if you only live off of dogma and say, this is what it is, this is it, and I only believe this, so your life and your potential and your wisdom loses grip, loses merit, and will not improve because it gets stale. It will crumble, and it's not of much use. Maybe it's of use in an environment which is pretty stable and doesn't change, but as soon as something will hit, as soon as you lose something, as soon as life poses a challenge upon you, you will have a hard time if you don't engage in this constant act of breathing, letting your narratives breathe, and really use the structures that work, be effective in doing what you know will work, but also being open and challenging the things you always do, and trying to improve them and reflecting upon them, and then taking in life as it really is, and not be attached to your identity because you always have been that way. Just adopt maybe multiple possible potential identities and try what works for you. Try what fits into the environment as it presents to you in the future, so that only having one identification won't kill you if the environment change, because it's really fragile if you don't think about what else could it be, what else can you be, and not only not think about it, but also feel about it, also experience it. Just take it in, just be aware, just breathe. And in that kind of sense, you can really enhance your maps, your multiple maps for multiple occasions, being utilized for different challenges, through properly taking in reality as it is. What do you think about this, Peyton?
Yeah, you point to something that's so true, which is that both sides of our brain have a lot to offer us. Both sides have immense power that we can learn to leverage, and we can learn to understand more and more and have that discernment when we're in a given situation on what does this situation need from me? Or in what way have I grown out of balance right now? In what way is the contraction that I'm experiencing actually the product of the habits or lack of discipline within my own mind? And what's clearly true is that the right brain and the left brain are both very intelligent in different ways. And for rough ways of putting it, the left brain is the languagey side of our brain. It's a part of us that talks, that understands and communicates in language. And if you think about language, we tend to put things sequentially. There tends to be one line of language at one time where I'm really giving a narrative about something that inherently is not going to communicate all of the context around something at a given time. And so it's more linear, it's more specific, it's more dialed in, it's more narrative-y, and it's more sequential versus the right side of our brain, which is more intuitive, taking in the territory itself, sensing a lot of things, and having an emotional reaction that runs effectively a calculation and an intuition on the present moment based off of a myriad of factors that could not be mathed out in sequential linear language one at a time. And so these two things have different sets of power. But what's true is both of these have immense power. Both of them are insufficient on their own. The right side of the brain, as great as it is at intuition, reaction, and wisdom in a lot of ways, and cutting through a lot of things going on at once and being intelligent in that context, feeling other people's energy, not just what's coming out of their mouth, to make more informed decisions about who we're interacting with and how. At the same time, it's not that good at forecasting and long-term deliberation and mapping stuff out and calculating long-term pros and cons. And it's not as good at clearly articulating its intentions to other people, and not as good at clearly articulating ideas and sharing ideas with other people. And so it has its own limitations as well. The thing that's very common, especially nowadays, especially in the modern world, especially now that we can type stuff on our phone and read things that other people have typed on their phone, once again, all with their left brain. The left brain is the only part of the brain that goes on Twitter. This part of our brain becomes very, 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 very reinforced by a lot of the things that are in front of us in our life. So much so that the most common thing that I believe that I see is that people have a very dominant left brain. The left brain is doing all of the talking, and they forget because the right brain doesn't talk, so it can't interject some language in there. It's just an intuition. The left brain shouts over the right brain in a lot of people. And this has been I've spent years of my life in this before I kind of understood these two ways of being, and how the intuitive way of being, it has a stronger intelligence of its own. The left brain can become out of balance and distorted in the bigger and bigger thing. And what happens is what Bodian is talking about in this quote, this sense of disconnectedness. You see all these people talking to themselves in their head, and we see ourselves talking to ourselves in our head, and we see how if we don't interject with some presence, some awakening, some intuition, then the game of telephone replays over and over and over and over and over, and then all of a sudden our thoughts are distorted. The first time we're replaying some memory, it's just normal. The fifth time, all of a sudden it's really distorted. The 10th time, it's extremely neurotic, negative, and distorted, while also simultaneously somehow being grandiose and inflated. And this hall of mirrors within our brain needs a check. It needs an immune system. It needs wisdom interjected in there. And wisdom is something that is not going to be necessarily shouted in language by the culture, because language is left-brained. Intuition is, once again, broad strokes, but right brain. And so when the left brain gets metastasized, when the left brain doesn't have a balancing mechanism and equilibrium, it can become more and more and more distorted. And it is the part of our brain that feels disconnectedness, that feels discontent, that feels like what is right here, right now is not enough. If you notice, when we are just in our direct experience, when we're just in our senses, when we're fully here, when we wake up from the language in our brain, when we're not telling ourselves a story about what we wish was different than right here in this moment, and we realize there is nothing lacking. Right now, if I just am taking in my senses, if I'm fully awake right here, and I'm just here, even if I have a headache, even if I just stubbed my toe, even if I didn't get that thing I wanted earlier today, even if I'm hungry, I actually can feel this is all exactly as it is. This is reality. This is perfect. This is everything. This is everything, and everything is enough. We can tap directly into contentment, connectedness, interconnectedness, and a sense that we are not separate from our environment. How am I separate from the water that I drank this morning? How am I separate from the water that I drank 3 weeks ago that's now in a lot of my cells? Am I separate from the food that I ate that is now making up the atoms that are in my beard? Am I separate from my parents and the food that they ate, and the ground that the food grew in, and the rain that fell on that ground that they created the food that they ate, that ended up being manifested into the DNA that turned into the first cell that ended up becoming me? I'm not separate from any of that. All of us are interconnected with our entire environment. We are not outside of it looking in. We are not fighting against the world from beyond it. We are embodied organisms within the environment. There is no separation. And that's something that our egos, our logical mind, our left brain will Will absolutely tell us a story that will make us feel totally separate. And whenever we are doing so to the extent that we're trapped in language. We are trapped in these thoughts and swirly thoughts within our mind. And one thing that's so true is that thought is a great tool, but a terrible master. And if we come out of balance, if we are constantly being conditioned by society to only live in language, to interact only with the map and not the territory, which is incredibly common, and a lot of us are there, even those of us who kind of see this definitely spend some time still only in the map and get distorted and get separated and feel this discontentment that is inherent to living in language and wanting things to be different, and desire and aversion and attachment. All of these things do cause us to feel this gap between what we wish was and what is, this suffering, this contraction that is very fundamental and symptomatic of a way of being that is out of balance. And tapping into a more balanced way of being, interacting directly with our senses, being spontaneous and feeling the flow that is within us, that has the potential to bring us back into balance of a creature living within a society that is dominated by left brains, where left brains are constantly conditioning other left brains to get out of balance. And we can feel once again a sense of connectedness, a sense of I am right here, a sense of flow, a sense of intuition, and a sense of enoughness, a sense that what is here right now, reality, is not something that I always have to be in disagreement with. Reality is not something that I always have to have a sense of struggle against. Reality can be a place where I can just be. Reality can be a place where I can be content with exactly what is. I don't have to always fight against everything all of the time. Something doesn't always have to be wrong. I don't have to always tell myself a story that this thing is wrong and give myself a sense of contraction 24/7. We don't have to make ourselves miserable by thought all of the time. But if we're not careful, we might accidentally do that. And so this is a really important thing in terms of our direct experience and the power that we can have over the world. If we know that we're going to be cast into a week of neuroticism if we don't have a positive interaction with this person right in front of us, then we are going to be two-faced because we know that we really want the outcome to be a certain way. We're attached to it and we are averse to it happening a different way. And so we won't have our full power, our full flexibility, because we will be weakened by this fear of something not going how we want. And a lot of things are like this, not just with other people. This is something where if we can recognize and then tap in over and over and over to a peace that is already present, an awareness that is already present, an awakeness that is already present, a contentment that is already present, regardless of what happened 10 minutes ago, we can realize that we are far more anti-fragile than we tend to take ourselves to be. And we can flow through the world, including through the ups and downs and volatilities of real challenging shit and things going up and down, with way more robustness and way more smoothness and way less attachment and way less rigidity and more flexibility that can empower us to pursue shit that a lot of people would back away from, where there's a lot of outsized rewards, where there might be skin in the game, and of course, ups and downs and positives and negatives and good energy and bad energy. But that's all a part of what is. Things are always changing, and reality is always going to take a different form. And a lot of times it's not going to be what we wish it would be, what we would have planned for it to be. But we can come to a comfort with that reality, and that can give us a wonderful peace that surpasses all understanding. So awesome thoughts. Any other thoughts from you about the map versus the territory and kind of an embodied way of being, how we can directly interface with this stuff and the power that that might bring?
So, yeah, actually, great thoughts, man. I really enjoy that you mentioned that the left brain, which is a narrative kind of sequential side, and the right brain taking it in all holistically and taking in reality as it is, the more feeling brain. That it also is an interplay between those two, and there's wisdom in this kind of dance. It is like Lao Tse said, don't be too rigid and don't be too soft. Because if you are too soft, then you won't stand against the wind when it comes. And if you are too rigid, you also won't stand against the wind when it comes, because you will break. And this kind of middle way thinking in terms of, okay, there's room for both. There's room for narratives. There's room for theories. There's room for labels and so on. But also, you have to always make room for taking it in, and just connect yourself, having and cultivating the sense of connectedness and enoughness, like you said, and really use it as a tool instead of being used by a terrible master. I recently watched some debates, and I also have some experience, like life experience in that kind of sense, where I didn't hold to my standard of, oh, I can connect with other people not only on the narrative way, but also on the kind of connection way, where you don't just marginalize the people and put them in a box and say, okay, if you think that, then you're obviously connected to people who are bad or people who are kind of in that box. And then you argue and you get so identified with what you want to say, and you don't listen to each other anymore. You have arguments which are malformed and which don't hold anything but the emotion you want to somehow communicate with your kind of story, because you think you got the only truth. So you don't listen anymore. So your voice raises. So you victimize yourself because the other person won't listen to you and will never accept what you have to say because you are you, and so on. So this is kind of a tool to use, which I now more regularly are able to really pull off in terms of pulling myself out of the situation, of the kind of over-identification with the message I want to convey, and over-identification with what I think is the real absolute truth, and just engage in kind of a relationship, in kind of a communication where you say, okay, is it this way? Okay, then point me to the ways you see the things. Maybe I will learn something. And having kind of the humility really helps in not letting the narrative rule you. And having the humility also will help you not to be too rigid, to break eventually when the real truth comes by, and the wind of the real truth will like blow you away because you over-identified yourself with kind of a different way of thinking. So you need to be adaptable. You want to be adaptable. You want to be humble, to also take in other points of view, to discuss ideas, and to breathe, to let this kind of narrative you have and you live with and you form breathe, so that you can be maybe like water and flow into every kind of form which will be presented to you, and also circumvent any and navigate around any hindrance or challenge which presents itself to you, because you are flexible, you are not too rigid. And this way, I believe, we can also fulfill the human needs to belong to a certain kind of group. Maybe you can say you can belong to people who are open-minded and also humble about it, and also just being able to discuss ideas without falling back on accusing each other to be some idiots or whatever. You can love other people through your way, how you interact with them, and not just put them in a box and say, okay, oh, you did this, so you are that one. So no, everybody has a story. Everybody has his own philosophy or her own philosophy, which is a result of all the life experiences she or he had. So autobiography determines the personal philosophy you have. So you can ask, okay, what is behind that? You can go the roundabout way and ask, okay, why do you think that certain kind of way now? And what can I learn from your life then, in how that way of thinking helped you overcome some challenges that you faced? And so you can also create a room where you can be safe with each other and discuss the things in a way where you know, okay, I won't be judged. I won't judge. I won't be attached to my opinion. I won't be overly attached to the narrative, I tell myself. And I won't resist any narrative that you present to me, because I won't identify with that narrative overly as well. So this is a way that I think is a practical way of really reconnect with life as it is, with what comes alive within yourself, also connect with other people, and also connect with reality. Just give it room to breathe. Just tell your narrative, but don't let society or your unconsciousness tell you what to do. Just really reflect and think about it, then take it in again and think about where you want to go, because no harbor is the right one if you don't know where you want to go. So no wind will be the right one to bring you to the harbor you want to go. There's the thing. Any closing thoughts on that one, Peyton?
Yeah, the way that we experience the world and the way that we attach or remain flexible with concepts and narratives is incredibly paradigmatic and has a huge impact, like you point to, from the five chimps theory. If we are constantly surrounding ourselves only by people who are reinforcing a certain codified, rigidified way of looking at things, where things are really good and really bad, and it's really good if the good things happen, it's really, really bad if the bad things happen. There's no other way to look at things, and these things have a necessary and durable impact over our own mind. We don't have control over our own mind, external events do. Then it's very easy to accidentally absorb these things, or it's natural to absorb these things, and it's upstream to remain balanced and to remain with some equilibrium throughout the ups and downs of life and narrative. And so it's incredibly valuable to have at least a few friends who, even if they're not telling you this all the time explicitly, they can kind of recalibrate you just by their example, and just almost without even intending, hold up a mirror to how you are interacting with your thoughts and concepts in perhaps a rigidified way. And this is important for me in my own experience, because I am one of the most naturally left brain dominant people I know. Like, this is a place where I spent years living in only the map before realizing that the territory was even something valuable or available to me. And so this is something that I naturally am very, very, very out of balance on, and was for a long time when I was younger. And it was super important for my own development and well-being to wake up from this into a more balanced way of being. And one last thought that I'll leave us with is that wonder, in the sense of awe, does not exist within thoughts. We are not going to be that directly in tune with awe if we look at Mount Everest and only think about how many feet tall it is, or we know about the concepts of the tectonic plates, or only about where this is on some map, and what percent of this is in China's borders, and what percent of this is in Nepal's borders. We can have a chance of experiencing true deep awe when we look at a landscape, when we can wake up from our thoughts and actually take the shit in, and actually fully convene with this directly, and not intermediated by trying to drink an ocean through a straw, which is kind of like trying to drink reality through our thoughts, or trying to interacting with all of our experience only through thoughts is like only experiencing food through our sense of smell and never actually tasting or feeling it. That is where we're tempted to live, and that is where we're reminded and conditioned to live if we are not awake, if we do not pay attention. So this is a way of being that I definitely hope to gain and regain and sustain and come back to a sense of balance when I inevitably get out of balance in this direction or that. This is a power that is ultimately accessible to all of us, and it is a first person game. No matter what we do, we will experience the consequences, and we are going to have to take our own ownership over what it is like to be us, because we can really have a good experience if we are wise with these things, and we can really get ourselves twisted up in knots to the extent that we forget to keep a balance with these things. So appreciate the reminders. This is always a very relevant topic for me, and something that I will absolutely bring some intentionality to in how I'm existing this week. Any closing thoughts from you, my man?
Same here, man. Appreciate the reminders from you as well. Thank you for sharing your ideas and discussing with me and adding to them all. May we wake up often from our daydreams and from our thoughts, and may we craft our narratives and really let them live and really make them adaptable to what we really want, what our thick desires are. May we experience the richness of life, not through a straw, but really through all of our senses, so that we can really experience life and live in this kind of sense of awe and wonder, man.
Let's dive into that ocean. Great talking to you, man. Appreciate you sharing your thoughts.
Appreciate you, man. Have a great week. Bye.
You as well. Bye.